All right, everybody. Welcome to the Solidarity Lowell May 2022 general meeting. Just a note that this meeting is being recorded. Guidelines for our virtual meetings. First of all, welcome to everybody. This meeting is being recorded and will be put on YouTube. By staying in the meeting, you agreed to be recorded. For speaking, to let us know that you want to be called on to speak on any of the items, please either use the raise hand feature in the Zoom or type an asterisk into the chat if you want to speak. We have a stacker who tonight is Dee Halzak, who is going to be paying attention to looking for those two things, and she'll call on you in turn. Timekeeper tonight is Amy Baranowski. Please be mindful of time limits. Actually, the things we have, we don't expect that's we're going to bump up too much against that, but we'll keep an eye on it. Please use stop video if you need to take a break from sharing your camera. That is fine. And start video when you're ready to return. And we have a practice we like to use in Solidarity Lowell called step up, step back. We want to make sure we're hearing from everybody and that everybody gets a chance to be heard of. So if there's conversations going on and we haven't heard from you yet, please step up. We want to hear what you all have to say. Similarly, if you have been participating and you have had your piece have said your piece, please step back to make sure other people have their opportunity too. Please speak slowly. We are dealing with Zoom here still, so it does help for clarity. Our agenda, starting 5:30-ish, brief attendee intros. At 5:40, we're going to have Solidarity Lowell updates. At 6 o'clock, we're going to have allied organization updates. And then at 6:15, we're going to have our main speaker tonight speaking about the ACLU's Know Your Sheriff program, about county sheriffs here in Massachusetts. And then at about 6:55, we'll wrap up. So starting off with the socially distant social hour, quarter hour. Introduce yourself, you with your name, your pronouns, where you live, and our icebreaker question of the night is, you have your own late night talk show. Who is your first guest? I will go first. I am Joseph Boyle. I live in the Highlands in Lowell. My pronouns are he, him. And if I had my own late night talk show, my first guest would be Sacha Baron Cohen. He's always a hoot. All right, next in line on my screen is Dee.
Hi, Dee Halzak, she, her. I live in the Acre. And my guest of choice would be Stacey Abrams, champion of democracy, which is my big thing. So
excellent. Let's see, next I have Chris Offerman.
Okay, Chris Offerman, pronouns she, her, live in downtown Lowell, and if I had my own talk show, my first guest would be Meryl Streep.
Win.
My name is Win Flint. My pronouns are she, her. I live in Christian Hill, and my first guest would be Trevor Noah's mom.
Oh, good one.
Meredith, welcome.
Hello, Meredith Lowell. I live in Billerica, she, her pronouns. So I was going to say Stacey Abrams because yes, amazing, but I'll come up with somebody different and I will say Barack Obama because I would love to chat with him.
Next on my screen, Rick Golden. Thanks for coming.
Rick Golden. I also live on Christian Hill around the corner from Wynn. He, him, and I would have the Beatles in 1965.
Oh.
All right. Amy.
Hi, everyone. Amy Baranowski, she, her pronouns. I live on kind of where the Acre meets the downtown and the outcropping near the stadium. And oh boy, I've been thinking about this all week. I think I'm gonna skip the political ones and I'm just gonna say Michelle Yeoh because I love her.
Let's see, Paul Gaudette.
Paul Gaudette from Highland section of Lowell, he, him, with Merrimack Valley Project. I would vote, I was independently came up with Stacey Abrams too. That's 3 votes for her. But my other guest would be Rick Steves from Travel Channel.
John.
John Grossman, he, him, Pawtuckaville, volunteer with 350 Mass. My first guest would be Mary Heglar from the Hot Take podcast. Check it out.
Good one. All right, next, Nathaniel. Welcome.
Thank you. I actually don't live in Lowell. I'm here as an ally. I'm signing in from Rockport, Massachusetts. For my guest, I would certainly invite Mujica, who was known as the former president of Uruguay. He was famously called the world's poorest president because he took the presidential palace and turned it into free housing for the homeless, moved into a single room cabin out in the countryside instead, and decided he didn't need a driver, took the money that was scheduled for the driver and gave that to the people and drove himself in a 1974 Volkswagen Beetle up until 2 years ago. So that would be my first guest.
Caroline.
Hi, everybody. Caroline Snow, she, her pronouns. I live in Centerville. And if I would have my own late night talk show, I would invite Trevor Noah.
Michelle.
Hi, everybody. Michelle Bouchard. I live in the Lowell's Acre neighborhood. Sorry. Pronouns are she, her, hers. I thought about this a lot. This is a hard question, but if I could have an interview with anybody, and unfortunately she did pass away a couple of years ago, it would be Toni Morrison, the author.
Good one. Ron? This Ron?
Yep. Am I unmuted? Can people hear me?
You can hear you now.
Okay. I live right next to Wynn. I have 2 answers to this question, one practical and one fanciful. The practical one is Heather Cox Richardson, who I would love to get more exposure to the rest of the world. The fanciful one is Jesus Christ, because boy, have we had way too many people say way too many things that he supposedly said and did and la 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 la. And I'd love to see if he could actually speak for himself and clean things up.
All right. And our last remaining guest, Linda. Linda, you here? All right. All right, we'll see if Linda comes back. Oh, there you go. Yay.
I'm on the phone and therefore it was a little tedious to figure it out. I'm Linda. I live I'm she, her, and I live in downtown Lowell. And I would have, unfortunately, he passed away, but Oliver Sacks.
Oh, good one.
The author and the scientist.
All right. So let's get into it. What is Solidarity Lowell? Solidarity Lowell is a volunteer-based group of community members of Greater Lowell working towards social justice by defending the human rights, dignity, and equality of all persons against hate and discrimination. We welcome new members. The Solidarity Lowell Coordinating Committee, CC members, put up your hand, is your elected team of volunteers running the meetings, organizing events, disseminating relevant news, and sharing calls to action. Speaking of which, the 2022 Solidarity Lowell Coordinating Committee election results are in. And congratulations to myself, to Dee Halzak, and to Chris Offerman on their unanimous re-elections. Yet to be determined, we still don't have word on whether write-in candidate Michelle Obama will accept her nomination. Okay, Progressive Mass. Solidarity Lowell is a chapter of Progressive Massachusetts. Progressive Mass is a statewide member-driven grassroots organization committed to fighting for a vision of shared prosperity, racial and social justice, good government, and environmental sustainability in Massachusetts. Visit progressivemass.com or contact us after the meeting to learn more. We're going to be talking more about Progressive Mass later in the meeting. But for now, there is good news. Progressive Mass is growing. There is a new chapter in Salem, which Nathaniel, you said you were from Rockport. That's up in your neck of the woods. So, maybe we can bring you on the Progressive Mass team. All right. All right. Now, we like to, what we call it, celebrating victories. We like to take a moment at each of these meetings and acknowledge some positive accomplishments, whether things that we did or whether it was positive things our allies across the country did. But something that we did, thank you to everyone who participated in our rally for reproductive rights on about, what was it, 3 or 4 days notice. We managed to put this together, get the word out, and have perhaps 40 to 50 people show up in front of City Hall with signs to do a visibility. So thanks to everybody who showed. Thanks to everybody who participated. Stay tuned. Looks like this is going to be one that we're going to have to keep an eye on and do more on. Continued. Other victories. Dr. Julie Chen has been named the next chancellor of the University of Massachusetts Lowell. Chen is the second woman to hold this position. In addition, she's the first member of the AAPI and LGBTQ plus communities to hold the position. So big step forward in Lowell. The Work and Family Mobility Act, the bill that allows people to get driver's licenses regardless of their immigration status, passed with a veto-proof majority in the House and is now on to the Senate. Is that still where it stands? Last time I looked.
Last week passed the Senate. So
and it passed the Senate too. So it has passed both houses with veto-proof majority. Excellent news. 7 Massachusetts landmarks will soon get a new name. Their current names, their former names contained an unfortunate indigenous slur, and it is being removed, will no longer appear on official maps. Who else has victories that they'd like to share? All right. Well, if you enjoy hearing good news, these days, join Solidarity Lowell Upbeat on Facebook.
John
Yes.
has one.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. Actually, I have 2 on the climate front. One, many of us reached out to Senator Kennedy to ask him to support an amendment to the Senate budget that would better fund the RTA system, and he did. The other is City of Lowell made a motion to apply for grants to improve the electric vehicle charging structure in town as a result of advocacy from our group and others.
Oh, good news. All right. Paul, you have your hand up.
This was just an item in the Globe that talked about at the State House, there's the committee to re-examine the state seal has agreed it needs to be changed. So now it's the process of finding out what it's going to look like. But there seems to be consensus that it's out of date and needs to be changed.
All right, looking through. Anyone else? All right. So moving along. Our next item is the Merrimack Valley Interfaith Sanctuary Network, which the network provides and space for and helps out people seeking asylum and seeking to not be deported. We have been supporting, or the group has been supporting an asylum seeker we call Marius. he had surgery recently to address ongoing health issues related to the violence he fled from in Togo and Guinea-Bissau. The Merrimack Valley Interfaith Sanctuary Network needs to extend ongoing assistance. Any amount that people can donate would be gratefully accepted. They have added a GoFundMe for Marius. You can also donate via Cash App or Venmo, and we provided the addresses here. Please put Marius in the notes, as that isn't the only project that they've taken on. Or if you would prefer to donate by check, please email our colleague Marissa DuPont at Solidarity Lowell. Her email is marissa@Solidarity Lowell for the address. Oh, Amy has helpfully put the GoFundMe also in the chat, so you can find it there as we move on. The next item, the Elections Committee. Progressive Mass has sent out their endorsement surveys for candidates for legislative offices. We have 2 competitive elections coming up in Lowell. Filling the seat being vacated by Tom Golden, as well as the state rep seat currently held by Ratty Mom. He is being challenged by Tara, our friend Tara. They have gone out. We have received back. They went out to all of the candidates in those, all of the so far registered candidates in those races. We have received back answers from Tara Hung and from Zoe. We are going through the process to, I'm sorry, I got us off the. We are going through the process of reviewing those with an eye towards making a nomination. It looks like we are going to be, Solidarity Lowell is going to be coming out with their our nominations, and then after that, Progressive Mass will be coming out with theirs. We're looking to take advantage of the opportunity to get, 2 bits of press out of this nomination. Progressive Mass also looks towards the chapters when it comes to races in their districts. So for more information about this, please contact either Lisa Arnold, Lisa@Solidarity Lowell, or D Halzak, D@SolidarityLowell.com. Anybody on the election committee have more? That is really what the election committee has been up to lately, is getting those together and reviewing. All right. Oh, D, I see you waving your hand.
I just wanted to say that in about a week or so, we will have PDF copies of the questionnaires so that members can review them before we vote on whether or not to endorse candidates.
That's right. Just as a reminder, our endorsement process for Solidarity Lowell is a vote by the membership. So that will be coming up probably at the June meeting. Will we be having the stay tuned for news on voting on the endorsements. All right, Wynn, I'm gonna throw over to you to discuss the Unpacking Whiteness workshops.
Hi. I've been giving these workshops now in other venues besides Solidarity for about 2 years now. I've given it to about 50, 60 people. It's a 4-week program. It's designed in a way that allows everyone to speak. There's no interrupting. It's very, very planned out. There's about 2 hours of homework every week. It is podcasts, audio, short videos, text, some humor. Gotta have some humor. And the topics range from what you would expect, like microaggressions, to the history at the federal government and some policy papers related to police. I make sure that we spend a good chunk of time on reparations. And most of the people that I've given this to are all your classic liberal Democrats who kind of basically already have a lay of the land. And every single one of them says that they've learned stuff. And my goal is to not be boring. And we're looking to start a new session. So that's the deal. Anything else?
Yes, we're looking to start a new session. We need members to start a new session. I am looking to be one of the participants in the next one. If anybody else who hasn't done this yet is interested, please contact Win.
I'll put my stuff in the chat.
All right. Oh, Paul?
Yes, could you say again the length of the presentation? It's
4 weeks. It's
4 weeks. Okay, 4 consecutive weeks running.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And over those 4 weeks, you meet once a week?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, once a week. And it's 2 hours long, the meeting. And it's on Zoom.
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's Zoom now. All right. We are this summer looking to get back into tabling. There are events again at which to table. There's going to be a Pride event. The Acre Fest is coming up in June, and then the Folk Festival in July. We are looking to have a presence there on those. I've tabled at the Folk Fest before. For more information and to talk about signing up for a shift, please contact Chris Offerman at chris@solidaritylowell.com.
Isn't it expensive to do the folk festival? No? Oh, never mind. Never mind.
There's a
No.
free speech zone that's designated, or several free speech zones every time at the book festival. And there it's free. You can just put yourself up and speak or distribute literature. That's what we've been doing. As long as we're not selling anything, we're not a vendor, then we don't have a fee for the table.
All right, anyone else? Comments, questions on tabling? It's easier than you think. Love to see more, love to see people get out there. Okay. Solidarity Lowell bylaws update. According to the Solidarity Lowell bylaws, we are, anytime there are changes, they are approved by the membership. So the coordinating committee went through and did a revision based on our experience. There were no major revisions necessary. There were some language things we wanted to clean up. To summarize those, we added clarity over what qualifies as a quorum. It's now 50% of the membership plus one. Oh, I'm sorry. We added to the bylaws that the Solidarity Lowell Coordinating Committee will share summaries of meeting notes and other activities in the RRT action list email, for kind of formalizing a process that we've been doing, making the RRT action list sort of a more official part of our operations. But this is basically what we've been doing already. It's just now adding it to the bylaws. All right, we added an item that the coordinating committee may appoint allies of members of allied organizations to act as advisors on specific tasks and activities. Okay. And we changed the language of changing the name from referring to committees to referring to subcommittees to make it clearer. We are going to give people a couple of minutes if they want to look at the bylaws for review. And then we are going to be holding a vote to hopefully approve the bylaws and as amended. If anybody has, we're going to use the vote feature that they have in Zoom. I'm going to stop sharing and we'll use the vote feature here. If anybody has any questions or comments or needs further discussion on this, vote for I have a comment or a question that I'll put in the chat and raise my hand to speak. The goal is going to be we're going to address those now, talk about them amongst ourselves, and hopefully arrive at a consensus that will allow us to adopt the bylaws. So Amy has put the link in the chat as well. I am going to stop sharing. And everybody can take a look at that. And then the vote is up. You should be seeing it on your screen.
Okay, we need 2 more people to vote. 8 out of 10 have voted. Not out of 10. We're 14 here.
Do you just click on the answer you want on the screen?
Yes.
Okay.
I have a question, Linda. I can't see the bylaws. I don't know where to go to find them.
They are in this chat. Do you know? But are you just calling in and can't see the chat?
I can no longer see the chat.
Okay.
The chat's been removed.
That's odd.
Okay, hold
And
on.
when I did see the chat, all I saw was vote either to approve or disapprove. I didn't see the bylaws themselves to read.
Yeah, let me try to get.
We put a link to the bylaws document into.
I did try to click on that.
Oh, and it didn't work?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay.
Linda, do you have an email?
All right, I think we're about as participated as we can be. And at this point, we have 80% of the participants saying yes, they approve. I don't know that anybody has a question. I don't see any in the chat or a raised hand that would say so.
All right.
So I think we can close the poll.
Nothing like controversy.
Yep. All right. Yeah. All right. Let's close the poll.
Okay, poll closed and the bylaws are approved.
All right. All right, then I am going to reshare now and we'll get back to just one moment. All right. Our next item. All right. What we like to do every month, updates and announcements from our allied groups. Please share any important information and upcoming events from other groups that you are involved in. We also welcome any local candidates to introduce themselves for 2 or 3 minutes. So who wants to start?
I would love to chat about what's happening in Billerica, a few things. So yes, I'm definitely supporting my good friend Sharice English. She's running for state rep, as some of you were aware. She did a 2020 write-in campaign, and she's doing it again. She's fully on the ballot. We went to the State House about a little over a week ago. She's officially on the ballot. She's the only one to have returned papers at that point. So we have no contested primary candidates that we are fully aware of. So there's that. We're having a pride flag raising on June 1st at our library, and right in downtown Billerica. I know there's a lot of events going on, and there's a lot of people from our community here who are going to be attending on Saturday, June 4th, all the festivities in Lowell, and we're very excited to have some of these things in person again. But yeah, just wanted to extend that, invitation. My 16-year-old child will be speaking, so I will be there supporting my child. I will be there on a very muted environment, strictly to let them have space for that day. But June 1st at our library, and I could put some info in the chat once I look it up, because I'm trying to remember if it's 6 or 7. Just wanted to share.
All Gaudette.
Oh, yep.
Yes, thank you. Merrimack Valley Project is having a fundraiser celebration. The details I put in the chat. It's going to be at Gary's Restaurant. That's on Andover Street, right near where the bridge crosses the river or the canal, whatever it is. And hopefully it'll be outdoors on one of their nice decks overlooking a grassy lawn and the waterfront. 6:30 on a Thursday evening, June 23rd, we're going to be celebrating, hopefully, that the driver's license bill will pass over the governor's veto, if he vetoes it by that time. And if not, that the campaign has done 18 years of effort and looks very promising. The other, the Wheels of Hope program is still going. So we're trying to get it funded through the state budget. But you'll hear a few stories from people who are directly involved in those campaigns. And it'll be a chance to have some hot hors d'oeuvres and spend a nice June evening out on the veranda and with some good friends. The other piece on MVP is that last weekend, 8 days ago, we had a hybrid meeting at Rolling Ridge with our sister organizations from the Berkshires, Waterbury, Connecticut, and Vermont.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful event. And the highlight of it for me was we broke into these various groups and we had to do a little mural about what we see as the just transition that we all dream about and hope for, going from an extractive economy to a regenerative economy where communities are healthy and well and celebrating a healthy economy, a healthy environment to raise children and families. It was wonderful.
Sean Grossman.
Yeah, on the climate front, there is a climate bill in the legislature. That's the good thing. It adds more procurement of offshore wind to increase our renewable energy supply. It also makes it easier to purchase electric vehicles. The bill is being in conference committee, so we'll see what it ends up in it. The problem is there are some significant pieces left out, and we don't have enough time to leave out any significant pieces, and they don't have anything on retrofitting buildings to make it easier to do that. They also don't have anything to stop the gas companies from pursuing their agenda, which is to stay in business forever. And the only way they can do that without massively changing their business plan is to guarantee climate change continuing. So those are two important missing pieces, and we'll be trying to find ways to get that into the final bill. In the meantime, on Wednesday at 6 o'clock, there will be a 350 Masses hosting a debate of the Attorney General candidates where they will be presenting their climate views. So that should be pretty interesting because that race is wide open and the Attorney General does play a significant role in addressing climate issues in the state. They can sue various entities, including the administration or companies, not the administration, but they can engage in legal processes to move things along if they're so of such a mind to do so. So you can register for that debate. I'll put that in the chat if you want to watch it or listen to it, and it's a good way to find out their views on the matter.
All right, I actually have one from the CBA. The Acre Fest, which we mentioned before, we're going to be tabling at, is on June 11th. It's at North Common Park. It's the Acre Fest Resource Fair. I am going to be there in dual roles, both as the as CBA person staffer, but I will also try to take part in the table. Anyone else?
What time does that start, Joe? Do you know?
Those things usually get going at 10. Those are usually 10 a.m. items. All right. And without seeing any more.
Joe, we have a late arrival to be introduced.
That's our speaker.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, and I see our speaker has arrived, Laura Rotolo from the ACLU, to talk about the Know Your Sheriff project. Laura, nice to see you with the impeccable timing. I'll let you unmute and let us know what's up.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm Laura with the ACLU of Massachusetts. Nice to see some of you who I've known for a while. So should I just launch right into this little conversation? Yeah, all right.
Yes,
great.
Go ahead.
So let me see if I can share my screen. Yes, I can share my screen. And I'm just gonna go ahead and start from the very beginning. So I'm here tonight to talk to you about sheriffs. We are running a public education, voter education campaign called Know Your Sheriff. And, I'm here to talk about that. And I'll just sort of the agenda of the things that I would like to cover tonight. And I think it'd be about a half hour. And we could do question and answers at the end. So I'll introduce myself in a minute. Then we're going to do a little pop quiz to see what you already know about sheriffs. Then we'll talk about who are sheriffs and what do they do. Then what do Massachusetts know about sheriffs? We actually did a statewide poll and got some very interesting results that I will be happy to share with you. Then we'll talk about sheriff's elections, because of course the reason we're doing this campaign is that it is 2022 when all sheriffs are up for election. And then to talk about the campaign goals of the Know Your Sheriff voter education campaign and how you can get involved. And then Q&A. Sound good? So I will just introduce myself. My name is Laura, or Laura, I say it both ways. I'm an immigrant from Argentina, grew up in Argentina and in New York, and then came to the Boston area for college and then stayed. I've been at the ACLU of Massachusetts for 15 years now. I started as a puppy lawyer in the legal department, and I'm now the director of the field department. And so that means that I work with a group of an amazing team, really, of organizers, policy experts, lobbyists, and campaign strategists. There's really only 3 of us, but we do all of that. And we do things like this, put together public education campaigns around a different issue. And the reason that we are focusing on sheriffs this year is because they're up for election, and learning from a very successful campaign that we ran in 2018 called what a difference a DA makes, which you may have known about or been part of. And that's where we highlighted the role of district attorneys in the criminal legal system. This time around, we are highlighting the role of sheriffs. And so we've built upon that campaign, which was actually really successful. We actually saw a little bit of an uptick in voter participation in district attorneys races and more challenged elections. And so learned a lot from that campaign and are setting our sights on sheriffs this year. And so pop quiz time. I'm going to ask you some questions. Maybe if you could feel free to just put your answers into the chat. I would love to know a few things from you. So number one, in the last election for sheriff, how many incumbents do you think lost their seats to a challenger? And just for background, there are 14 counties and 14 sheriffs. They're all up for election at the same time. How many is your guess? All right. Sounds like some of you already know the answer to this. 9 out of 14 says Caroline. D says 0. And of course, hold on, now I have to get out of the chat. The answer is 0. 0 of 14 incumbents lost their seats to a challenger in the last election. All right, and who do sheriffs report to? In the bureaucracy that is Massachusetts, who do sheriffs report to? I know, Caroline, right? The governor, the legislature, the attorney general, nobody. I see more nobodies, the head of prison, so like the Department of Corrections. So whoever wrote nobody, I mean, it's not nobody, but the answer is the voters. So they're not within the executive office. They are within the executive office and that they're not the legislature, but they don't report to the governor. They are elected and not appointed. They don't report to the Department of Corrections. They get a budget from the legislature, and sure, the Department of Health may do audits here and there. Maybe the state auditor will audit their budget expenses, but at the end of the day, they're really only responsible to the voters. And really the only way to hold sheriffs accountable, unless you're going to sue, in court, is for voters to get engaged, because there is no other entity supervising what sheriffs do. And that's not the same in the entire country, but in Massachusetts, it is very much the case that they are elected officials and are responsible to their voters. But of course, they're not like Congress people or state representatives where they have a constituent service line, right? Where you can call and talk to them and send them sign-in letters. They very much do what they do, and we'll get into that, but are accountable to the voters. All right. How often are sheriffs elected? I'm going to look at the chat. Should they have a higher authority? That's a good question, Ron. Every 4 years, 4 years, 4 years. All right. And the correct answer is every 6 years. So that is the longest term that a state official can actually serve. I think there's 1 or 2 other seats that serve 6 years. But most others are 4 years, of course. And so, for example, district attorneys are every 4 years. Sheriffs are every 6 years, another reason to focus this year. And sheriffs and DAs are actually aligning this year, which only happens every 12 years. So, all right. And what county is Lowell in? I know maybe that's simple, maybe it's not. And who is your sheriff? Let's see how much you know. Middlesex. What's the name of your sheriff? Extra points for correct spelling. Middlesex K something. I love it. I love it. Okay, yeah. So you're in Middlesex County and your sheriff is Peter Katusian. And the reason I ask that is because, spoiler alert, when we get to the poll later on, you know more than the average voter. But because we don't actually have a lot of county government in Massachusetts, a lot of people don't even know what county they live in. So maybe the first time you might realize it is when you're filling out a form and you're asked to put in your county, and you actually have to look it up on, on Google or something. A lot of people don't know what county they live in, because really the only forms of county government we have left in Massachusetts since they've been abolished is district attorneys and jails and houses of correction and sheriffs. Okay, So nice job on your quiz. We'll talk about what the rest of Massachusetts voters know in a minute, but let's just go over the basics. What is the role of a sheriff in Massachusetts? So what do they do? The main thing that they do is they run the houses of corrections and the jails. And so over half of the state's incarcerated population are in county custody. That's over 11,000 beds total and around 6,000 or 7,000 beds that are currently filled. And that includes both pretrial and sentenced people. And these are sentences that are 2.5 years or less. So pretrial people are people who can't make bail or who aren't given bail for whatever reason. So maybe the severity of their crime or just a complete inability to pay. So a lot of people living in poverty are in pretrial detention. And those who are sentenced to 2.5 years or less are sentenced to county house of corrections, that sentences. And so actually pretrial can sometimes be longer than your sentence. As you know, there's all sorts of issues with bail that I don't have to get into with you. But the idea is that these folks are going back home, right? So these are not life sentences. And they have immigration detainees. And so they will contract out with the federal government to hold immigration detainees, which are civil detainees, and they're just there while they're doing their immigration cases. They're not serving a criminal sentence. And then the contract that they can enter into with the federal government include these very harmful contracts called 287Gs and detention contracts. And we'll talk about 287G in a minute. But they also supervise their staff, of course, and they control their budget. Another thing that you might see them do is they transport prisoners and people in custody. So you might see sheriff's vans going up and down, and that is because they are contracting with the courts and with other entities to take prisoners from the county jails or even from state prisons and transport them to court. And then they serve papers. So if you're getting a divorce and you need, somebody to serve your spouse, a sheriff is also a constable, and they can do that. Very old timey, very like English colonial. Okay, so just the 287G agreements, you don't have one in Middlesex County, but there's nothing stopping the sheriff from signing into one. And what they are is they're an agreement between Immigration and Customs Enforcement and local sheriff's department that actually deputize sheriff staff to act as immigration agents in their communities. They're paid by local taxpayer money, so they're paid by the county, but they do the work as an immigration agent. And there are about 142 agreements across the United States and only one left in Massachusetts, actually one left in New England, and that is currently in Barnstable County. We used to have one in Plymouth and Bristol County, and those have ended. So there's only one left in all of New England, and that's down on the Cape. Okay, one more quiz. Knowing what you know, what do you think is about an average sheriff's budget? And the budget comes from the state legislature, and for a year. What would you say how their budgets? 250,000, 3 million, 30 million. All right. So the answer is here. And this is for 2021. This is from the state legislature website. So you'll see that the largest one is the Suffolk Sheriff's Department, $117 million. And you'll see that Middlesex is in here at $72 million. Question, how much does it take to incarcerate people in the United States, the largest jailer in the world? Okay, and so the conditions of the houses of correction are really what we're very much concerned with this campaign. And for people who know a lot about sheriffs, it's because you know about jails. And so they are responsible for everything inside a jail, all physical conditions. So that's medical treatment, including access to vaccines, which of course became so important during the pandemic, where groups like the ACLU and others had to litigate to make sure that prisoners were getting access to COVID vaccines. Medically assisted treatment and addiction treatment is a huge issue within jails because people come in addicted to substances. And this is another thing that people have had to litigate to make sure that they get the treatment that they need, as opposed to just be allowed to detox with a bucket in a cell, which is no exaggeration. And any programming like educational programs. These 2.5 years that people are spending incarcerated are an opportunity to learn skills to re-enter their communities. Or are they going to spend it doing meaningless work or just being bored, right? And then of course, re-entry, how do they re-enter? What are the programs that they have access to in order to return to their communities? Access to visitors and attorneys is completely up to the sheriff. And you've ever been banned from visiting a prisoner at a county facility, you know just how hard that can be when a sheriff decides that for whatever reason, you're not welcome there. There's no real due process. You can appeal back to the sheriff and then just be denied again. And we've had family members who have come to that for that reason. Phone access and costs. There was a recent Supreme Judicial Court case about how expensive sheriffs can make phone calls. And of course, access to voting. If you are not currently serving a sentence for a felony, you are still able to vote even while incarcerated. But how easy that is, that process is up to the sheriff. And then, of course, immigration detention conditions for those who are in immigration custody. And the only place right now that has immigration detainees is the Plymouth County facility. So there are no immigration detainees currently in Middlesex County. So what don't sheriffs do? And this is something where, it's important to put it in context because sheriffs do very different things in other parts of the country. Sheriffs in Massachusetts do not engage in community law enforcement. They are not out arresting people. They are not out patrolling the streets. They're not out stopping people in their vehicles, which you might see in places like Arizona and California. They just don't have the authority to do that here. And there, as we talked about, there's no county government except for jails and district attorneys. So they're not really part of a county-based government structure. And your sheriff's name is Peter Katusian. A little bit about him is he's been a sheriff since he was appointed by Deval Patrick when the previous sheriff passed away in 2011. He then ran again in 2016. He faced a primary challenger, but won very comfortably. Did not face a general challenger in 2016. He's a Democrat. He's a former state representative, and right now he has no challenger for 2022. And the Middlesex Jail and House of Correction is in Billerica. The House of Correction currently, as of this past week, housed 428 inmates, and the jail housed 439 pretrial detainees. So that's about 900 people who are currently housed at the House of Correction and jail. Okay, and so getting back to what do Massachusetts voters know about their sheriff? We had the chance to run a statewide poll. It was an online poll. We used a firm called Beacon Research, and we asked very simple questions about, could they name their sheriff? What do sheriffs do? How often are they elected? Very much like the quiz that we took earlier. And so when we asked, who is your sheriff? Can you correctly name your sheriff? We were blown away by the fact that 83% of respondents could not name their sheriff. Only 17% could actually name their sheriff statewide. And then when you look at this per county, it gets very interesting. Bristol County, where the infamous Sheriff Hodgson sits, 52% of people could name who their sheriff was. But if you go down this line in Suffolk County, which you would think Boston, right? Like people are very engaged. People are, know about the criminal legal system. Only 6% of people knew that Sheriff Tompkins was their sheriff. And in Middlesex, only 8% of people could name Peter Katusian. So clearly you all are very much ahead of that curve. Only 10% of voters knew how long the sheriff's term was. People guessed sort of all over. 1, 2, 3, 4 years. It's very much in line with your answers. I think a standard response is 4 years, but in fact, only 10% knew that it was a 6-year term. And when we asked about the role of sheriffs and how they assume office, so do sheriffs have the same duties as police officers? 33% of them said yes. 26 unsure, right? And as we talked about a little earlier, their role is very different from police officers. Police officers are very much in the community, for better or for worse, but they're in the community, whereas sheriffs are very much within those jail walls, right? And then our sheriffs elected, yes, 59% knew, 9 did not know, and 32 were actually not sure whether sheriffs were elected or not. And then we asked a little, this was a lot of small text, and I'm happy to share these slides with you, but we wanted to know what is important to you about sheriffs. And once we talked to them a little bit, we saw that one of the things that's most important is, of course, overseeing county jails. But one of the things that's really important to voters is rehabilitation and education programs that are offered in county jails. We'll see that 85% of them thought it was somewhat or very important to know where sheriffs stand on rehabilitation programs and education programs. And by rehabilitation, that word we use to mean drug addiction rehabilitation, not sort of education programs. Those are two separate buckets. 76% of people were interested in the fact that it was a 6-year term. 75% that sheriffs can choose or not to work with the federal government in immigration. 72% that in 2016, only 14 sheriffs, not a single incumbent lost their seat. And then other issues also sort of came up as interesting and important to people. So this is why we are very excited about the campaign. Once we gave them information about what do sheriffs do, we asked first, how likely are you to vote? And then we gave them information. And then we asked again at the end of the poll, how likely are you vote now that you know more about what a sheriff does? And just by giving them information without giving them any messaging, any opinions, just the basic information we just talked about now about what do sheriffs do, we saw a 20% increase in people saying they were very likely or somewhat likely to vote. And so to us, that tells us that once people are educated, they are likely to actually make a choice about sheriffs. Okay, and so a little bit about how sheriffs are elected, how these work. We talked about how they're every 6 years. Another important thing to note is that there are no term limits. So some sheriffs could be here for, their entire careers. There are no term limits at all. And in the last 2016 election, again, not a single incumbent lost his seat, and they were all men. 6 of them ran unopposed. 4 sheriffs retired. So we did get 4 new sheriffs, but only because 4 sheriffs retired. And 4 had challengers, but won by very large margins. And here, to me, is one of the kickers. One of the reasons that I believe so strongly in the campaign is that in the last election, there were over 670,000 blank ballots for sheriffs. And so if you remember, 2016 was a presidential election, so pretty high voter turnout. 670,000 people around the state went to the ballots, got up out of their houses, got to the voting poll on time, pressed that lever, filled out that Scantron form, and left the sheriff's space blank. So that's, 670,000 ballots, votes that could have actually been cast for a sheriff, but weren't. And in Essex County, this is an example that just really gets me. This is the election in Essex County for primary. And Kevin Cobbinger, who's currently the sheriff and won later in the general, this was the spread. And you'll see that there was, between the top 2 candidates, 1,677 votes difference. Not a lot, right? If we're talking about 670,000 blank ballots, 1,600, less than 1,700 difference in the top 2. But you'll notice 2,023 blank votes. So more blanks than the difference between the top 2 candidates. And so we just think it is so important to really increase awareness and voter turnout. So you might be curious about the Middlesex Sheriff primary. Peter Katusian ran unopposed in the general, did have a challenger, Barry Kelleher, who was I think a career corrections officer in the primary, so the 2 Democrats. But you'll see that Katusian won by a very, very large margin. And that was the case across the board for the elections for sheriff in 2016, whether the primary or the general. And again, I mean, if you look at, this is the primary, right? But we only had 72,000 people vote and 10,000, over 10,000 blank ballots even there. So almost as many as people voted for Kelleher left their space blank. And these are the sheriff's races that we're looking at. This is all 14 sheriffs, and the highlighted ones are the ones where we know there are challengers, or in Essex, for example, Sheriff Coppinger is retiring. Barnstable, Sheriff Cummings is also retiring. And so there will be races. Some have primary challengers, some are going to go to the general. The overall deadline for this is May 31st. So we don't know the full scope of the races, but these are the ones that are looking like they're contested now. So you'll see that 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 are not contested once again. And this is a year where a lot of statewide offices are happening. And so it's the sort of blue moon where DAs and sheriffs align, but also governors, or all these 4-year terms are aligning with the 6-year term of the sheriff. And so even though it's a federal midterm election, there are a lot of state offices that are running this year, including the attorney general, and of course the district attorney, the county, the governor, of course, Baker leaving office, and Maura Healey running. So the attorney general seat will also just be open. So a lot of state races happening. The primary will be September 6th and the general November 8th. And so with this campaign, what we really want to do is we just want to educate voters about the role and the power of sheriffs, and that they're accountable to voters. And off the bat, I do want to say, you know, this is a 501c3 nonpartisan campaign. The ACLU will not be endorsing. We're not going to be working closely with people who are endorsing candidates. It is 100% nonpartisan. And we want to increase voter turnout in sheriff's races. We want to engage in conversations about the criminal legal system. We want to, whether, you know, it's a county that's contested or not, we want to engage with people around these conversations, because whether or not your sheriff has a challenger, it's important to hold them accountable. It's important for them to know that we are watching, that we are paying attention, and that we are learning about what happens inside jails and houses of corrections. And that it goes to building toward accountability, because again, it's really only the voters that hold them accountable. And so even though Peter Katusha might not face a challenger this year, there are many ways to get involved in the campaign. So for example, hosting a public education forum in your community. I will share out these slides so you could do whatever you like with them. If you want to do this presentation or a similar presentation, we could get you more materials to do in, you know, in libraries and schools. And maybe there are summer events where you could do some tabling. We have some materials available, and we will be printing out materials so that over the summer, if you're tabling, please hand out information about sheriffs. And then closer to the elections, we'll be doing text and phone banking and getting out the vote, whether or not it's challenged. If you're interested in doing that kind of work, please let us know, and maybe we could collaborate with you. That is the link to sign up to. It says volunteer, but really it's just, you know, get involved. I'll paste it into the chat as well, so that we could have your information. And if you're interested in having a greater conversation about this, we are very much open to it. And that's it. That's my email. And I mean, I think we could do questions and answers if you'd like. I'm very interested to hear from you all what your experience has been with Sheriff Katusian and with these races in general.
All right, folks, hands, asterisks. If you'd like to speak. Looks like Wynn has her hand up.
I heard that the Middlesex sheriff was kind of progressive, and that he actually was head of a national sheriff organization. Can you, I lost you somewhere. Can you speak to that? Oh, there you are.
He's known as being on the progressive side. Yes, that is true. I think in the sort of spectrum of how people generally view sheriffs, he is known to be more progressive. And I think he's the former head of the Massachusetts Sheriff's Association. and may very well be part of, I'll have to look that up, but may very well be part of a national organization because he's very much involved with the other sheriffs as well, and sort of a leader, a leader among sheriffs. At least that's how he's seen. Yeah.
Rick and then Caroline.
Let's see. So it seems to me that it would be better to have, I don't know, professional prison coordinators who are trained rather than sheriffs. Are there any states that have a better system than the sheriff in terms of, running the prisons and the other stuff that they do?
That's a really great question. I hadn't thought about that. So, they have, the sheriff runs the House of Correction and the jail in every county, but they also have jail superintendents who do like the daily, running of that facility, and they work hand in hand. So the sheriff is like the political figure, sets the vision and the policy and the tone. And then they have superintendents that are usually like COs who have, gone up through the ranks often. And so there's a combination of that happens in Massachusetts. In other states, I think because sheriffs do so much more like law enforcement work out in the community, they also tend to have people like superintendents like us, like we do, who are, COs and jail professionals. But like in Middlesex County, before he was sheriff, Peter Katusian was a state representative. He ran for Ed Markey's seat as well in the House of Representatives. So he was a politician, right? He wasn't a corrections officer. And so, I mean, I think there's a debate about that, right? Like, do you want somebody who's coming in from the outside? There's a challenger in Essex County who is a social worker. Do you want somebody who knows policy? Do you want somebody who has worked inside jails? I think there's a real debate that we can have about that.
Caroline?
Can you hear me? Awesome. Thank you for the presentation. I think that's great. And my question was, how many people did you poll overall? And how did you find those people to survey?
Yeah, great question. Let me look up. I think it was 2000. Let me put the link into the poll, to the poll summary. It's on our website. And we looked at mostly moderate voters, and the spread. So we sort of tried to mimic, and this is Beacon Research. This is not us. We paid them to do it. They're very seasoned pollsters, and I think they tried to mimic what the electorate looks like in Massachusetts. So a lot of moderate voters, and then people on either side, but trying to sort of match what the electorate looks like. Anyway, let me pull up that poll while we're talking so that I can give you the exact number. But we can keep on talking if you want. It'll take me just a minute. I don't know if you want to go to the next question while I find the number of voters total.
Michelle?
Hey there. So on the 287G agreement, are those just specific to immigration issues?
Are they specific to, say that again?
To, like, I know you mentioned like the sheriff can decide to enter into these 287G agreements. Are those agreements just to do with immigration enforcement?
Yes, they are.
They are specific. Okay. The second part of that is like, if the sheriff decided to enter into one of these, is there anything the people or the DA or anything can be done about this agreement? Like, is it debated or is it just like decided by the sheriff?
Right. So let me just say, I pulled up the answer to the previous question, which is there were 970 registered voters. I'm going to put the link so that you can actually see the results of the poll. So 970 Massachusetts registered voters. It was done online with slight weights to ensure the sample accuracy that reflected the demographic profile of the Massachusetts electorate. So that's the answer. And you can see a lot more details in that link that I just posted. So on 287G agreements, one of the issues is that it's just the sheriff who decides to do that. There's no other body that tells them whether they can or can't. This has actually been a subject of litigation recently with the Barnstable sheriff, who has the sole remaining 287G agreement, currently being sued by lawyers for civil rights. And the theory of their case is that sheriffs actually don't have the legal authority to enter into these contracts because sheriffs are state employees. And I'll see if I can find the link to that lawsuit. That lawsuit is still pending. So it would be very interesting if the state court decides that that theory is correct and they can't enter in these agreements. But right now, it is just up to any sheriff to enter into them, cancel them at will. And that's why even if, the new Barnstable sheriff decides to cancel that agreement, there's nothing stopping any sheriff from entering into a new one with a new administration, right? And so under the Trump administration, they were really pushing these agreements. Under Biden, they've sort of slowed down a little bit, and they actually ended the Hodgson one, the Bristol County one. The Department of Homeland Security actually pulled out of that one because there were such problems at the Bristol County Jail and so many problems with Hodgson himself, like just his anti-immigrant public statements. And so they pulled out of that, but there is nothing currently legally stopping them from any sheriff from signing a new agreement, and no community process or even state process to oversee that agreement.
Paul Gaudette.
Yes, there's a nationwide movement to privatize state agencies and so on, thinking about the charter school movement in public schools, state hospitals that they want to hand over to private for-profit groups. I know there's a movement to privatize prisons. Has that movement made any inroads in Massachusetts, as far as you know?
I think no, and actually quite the opposite. Certainly there are entities that would love that, but we do not have any private jails or prisons in Massachusetts, and no private immigration detention centers in Massachusetts either. And I think from our point of view, they're incredibly problematic. There's less accountability for private prisons. Like you can't even do a FOIA request, right? Like the Freedom of Information Act does not even apply to private prisons and jails. And so I think luckily there has not been a very strong movement to privatizing those. Though I will say that the medical care inside the facilities is almost always privatized. And that in itself is a problem because these for-profit entities are in charge of the health and, the health and well-being of prisoners and are not accountable in the same way that a public entity would be.
Thank you.
Yeah.
John Grossman.
Do you say a little bit about what the campaign issues, have there been any campaign issues that you could identify in Massachusetts when people, in the rare situations when people do run against incumbent sheriffs? I know that the guy in Bristol I would consider him a bit of an exception. But thinking about what might take place here in Middlesex County, to get people interested, the DA question, there's sort of obvious ramifications that the average citizen could relate to. What crimes will be charged? Will there be harsh sentences or lenient sentences, that sort of thing? It's a little harder to imagine what the issues would be for the general public on the sheriff's race, unless there was dramatic problems in the prisons, which in the jails, and seems likely that there are problems in the jails, but I don't know that much about it. I guess that's fortunate in my case, but can you speak on that a little bit about what issues maybe there have been already, and if not, what you could, if you feel comfortable, what you would imagine they might be?
I think they tend to be, and we're seeing that play out again this year, your sort of theory of why we have jails, right? Like, is this are jails about punishment and retribution, or are they about education and rehabilitation, right? And where on that spectrum does the sheriff fall? And so there's this sort of very basic question, because their main job is jailing people. What's your theory about jailing people, and how are you going to treat them? And what we saw in the poll is that the issues that are most important to the voters that we polled were about drug addiction treatment, medical health treatment, mental health treatment, and then a little bit lower on that, education programs. But because I think in the past 6 years, the public awareness, I would say, of addiction as a public health issue has grown so much and has really changed so much in the past 6 years. There is more of a concern or a sensitivity by voters that is an issue within our jails, and that people need to be treated well, right? And so that came up as the number one priority in our poll. Addiction treatment, and then mental health treatment very closely related to that, because I think there's more of an awareness as well that people go into jails many times with mental health issues.
Ron?
Am I unmuted? Can people hear me?
Yes.
Laura, is there a effort by the ACLU to go after for pay prisons on 8th Amendment grounds? Because it seems to me there's no way to avoid it. If they're motivated by a profit margin, then sooner or later they're going to cut enough corners that they're going to end up violating the 8th Amendment.
Right, and again, just because there are none in Massachusetts, I'll speak to litigation around the country, and we have a whole prisoner rights program that's based out of Washington, D.C. And the litigation almost always turns on 8th Amendment, 4th Amendment, 5th Amendment issues about cruel, unusual treatment, 8th Amendment, and then due process rights under the 4th and 5th Amendments. And that's sort of the bread and butter of our prison litigation. For immigration detainees, and we also have a whole other program dedicated to immigration detainees. Because they're civil detainees, they don't technically fall under the 8th Amendment, but we use the 4th and 5th Amendments as sort of stand-ins to say, that their rights are being violated. But you're absolutely right that they do cut corners, and it's so hard to hold these private prisons accountable. And because, when we're talking about immigration detainees, they can be held anywhere in the country, right? So you could have lived in Massachusetts all your life, but there isn't a space for you here in Barnstable County or Plymouth County at this point. They could send you anywhere across the country, including to a GEO facility in Texas, right? And so people from Massachusetts who are in immigration detention do get sent to private facilities far, far away from here. And we see, and these problems are absolutely endemic. The cutting corners, the profit margins, and I think I remember seeing some years ago that if you look at who is lobbying, there's like this really bizarre group of people who are lobbying for private jails, right? And like who stands to profit from that is a question that people around the country are asking.
A follow-up question to that. How are we doing at I had the dubious pleasure of testifying in favor of the Safe Drivers Act right after that. I don't have a polite word. Sheriff who wanted to send our inmates down to the border to help with the immigration stuff. So I definitely would like to see him gone. What's the odds, in your opinion, that we're actually going to be able to replace him?
So we're not placing bets and we're not going to be endorsing any candidate. I will say that he does have 2 or 3 challengers at this point, I believe. So he runs as a Republican, and there are 3 Democrats running for sheriff in Bristol County right now. And so, after the primary, we'll see. But he did not have a very, I think he won by a very, very large margin last time around. And so this time around, there does seem to be more energy from challengers, including, the Attleboro mayor, Paul Hero and a couple of other people who are running as Democrats. So I don't know. We will see. We will see.
Looks like Paul again.
Yeah, the phone call is one of those issues that bubbled up to the surface because of the abuse and the suffering that families have to undergo. And I know the Globe had a piece saying these calls should be free. Are there allied organizations, I'm thinking of families of prisoners, for example, who could pipeline these issues to groups like Solidarity Lowell so that we could be advocates?
Absolutely. That, in fact, is going to be one, if we will be doing questionnaires for the contested races. We'll be doing candidate questionnaires. And that is one of the questions that we will absolutely be asking. How, do you pledge to keep costs low? So right now, there are two things that are happening. One is that the Supreme Judicial Court just ruled in a case against the Bristol County Sheriff, and that was brought by Prisoners Legal Services and a few other groups that are, very much represent the interests of prisoners and their families. And that is because the sheriff was basically taking kickbacks, right? So he was, charging for phone calls, and then the company was paying a fee into the county budget. And so the calls were extraordinary, and that includes video conferencing. So if you're doing a video conference, they use this thing called Securus in another county, and it costs about $20 for a 30-minute phone call. And there's an extra fee if the video call originates more than, I think, 30 miles from where you are, as if that mattered, right? I mean, where are we? It does, you could be in Argentina, as far as I know. It doesn't matter, right? It's not how the internet works. But Bristol County was charging extra, and so the calls were extraordinarily expensive. And the Supreme Judicial Court unfortunately held that the legislature allows for this, right? That the law actually allows for this, and so that they could keep on going. And that is essentially up to the sheriff to decide how much to charge for these phone calls. Like, what are these contracts with these phone companies and video conferencing companies going to look like? And so now that we know it's in the hands of the sheriffs, we're very much going to be asking that. On a separate track, in the state legislature, there are bills for no-cost phone calls, and there is a provision for no-cost phone calls in the budget right now. And so there is a chance that that will pass before the last session, that both the House and the Senate put in money for actual no-cost phone calls for inmates and prisoners. So we're going to keep our eye on that, because this may be an issue that is actually taken care of by the legislature by the end of this session. But if not, it's going to be one of our top questions. Did I answer your question? I feel like I rambled on that. Okay. Thanks, Paul.
All right, and with that, we are going to wrap up this session and this meeting. Thank you very much, Laura. That was highly educational.
Thank you so much. And again, and I saw that Chris said that you'll be doing some tabling, so I will get you all printed materials when we have them. And let's just be in touch about the materials. So because this sheriff's race is not contested, there aren't going to be like forums and questionnaires. But if you want to collaborate on some sort of Middlesex specific materials, I would be happy to do that, to get like more Middlesex specific facts, so that I'm not just giving you the statewide work.
All right.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Happy Sunday, everyone. Bye.
Happy Sunday. All right. So our next meeting is June 26th. Topics to be determined. Who wants to help us out with reminder calls and texts? You get a script. I see John has his hand up. You get a script. You get a list of numbers, usually about 9. For each person's taking part, and many hands makes light work. So anybody who can is willing to help us out.
Wynn's got her hand up too.
Oh, good.
And Meredith just put it in the chat. Thank you, Meredith. I will, since I'll be coordinating the reminders, I'll add you to that.
All right, great. And after that, after the June meeting, we are looking ahead to the Solidarity Lowell Summer Barbecue on July 24th. So stay tuned. As always, you may join us online. Take a look at our Facebook page. Join us in our Facebook group. Visit our website. Join us on Slack. Follow us on Instagram or Twitter. All right. Thank you very much for coming, everybody. We are going to let you out on time tonight. Have a good evening.